Well, how I got to even find out about my liver was just by chance. And every bit of research I've done up until this point has shown me that most people that find out about their liver, it's really by chance. It's like stumbled across. That's why a lot of the time when people die and it was liver cancer, it's too late by the time they find out, because it could move so silently, and the liver is the one place that's connected to all of your organs, and from there the cancer just spreads. So generally when somebody says liver cancer, you're already going, oh, okay, there goes, all these other organs as well. So for me, it was like I was turning 40. I think I was 39 or something, and I was like, I was already thinking like I'm 40, so I was like, I need to go get a full body checkup. So I went to Thailand, to Bangkok, to Bumrungrad Hospital. Most people are going there for plastic surgery. I just went there because it had a cheap body checkup. So I did the body checkup, and that's when, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, they're going to tell me I got cancer. It's breast cancer. I'm sure of it. I did the mammogram and everything. First time doing that, horrendously painful. And they said, oh, we see something on your mammogram, maybe we need to, but it wasn't like we need to do a follow-up or whatever. It was like straight away. They're like, okay, let's do another one to make sure. And that was what was so epic about that whole experience, is that it was just so real time. Everything was done immediately. You had your answer straight away.
Wow, that doesn't usually happen.
No.
In the US, you wait a week and
Exactly. Something. Oh, we see something. Okay, let's wait and let's book you in another appointment. This all happened within the course of the same set of hours that I was there. And then they were like, "Oh, no problem, nothing to worry about, just minor calcification, whatever. It's normal." But then they said, "Oh, there's some shadows on your liver," and that was totally unexpected because I was like, "What?" And that they couldn't just like, okay, let's go and check that out some more. They said, okay, look, what we would suggest when you get back to Hong Kong, just set up an appointment with a hepatologist or hepatobiliary specialist. So I did that because I was really nervous. And then when I came back, I did, I think, a CT scan, because initially they found it with a ultrasound. And so then I did a CT scan, and that came up again, confirming that there was shadows, and they said, possible lesions, cysts, and stuff like that. So then I went on to get an MRI, and a contrast MRI after that. So by this point, of course, I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I mean, I was just, but the doctor was like, I wouldn't worry about it. It's pretty common. And I was like, okay, how common? In about 10% of people. So I thought that doesn't sound that common. But then he was like, oh, but I've got one too. And mine's like 4 centimeters or whatever, to allay my fears and prevent escalation of my anxiety. So when I asked him for advice, what do I do? What do I do? Should I like avoid alcohol? Should I avoid eating certain things? And he really sort of like, he just said, oh, if you had a mole on your face, do you think that would go away if you changed what you ate or what you drank? And I thought, well, no, probably not. And then he says, yeah, just come back in 6 months. We'll do another, MRI. So at that point, I thought, okay, that's weird, but if the doctor says it's no big deal, that it's probably benign and whatever, I didn't ask too many questions at the time because he was a specialist. 6 months later, I'd cut down any drinking or whatever, and I like avoided seafood, and I tried to avoid certain things that I was like, okay, there might be heavy metals in this, just to ease off. But I didn't stop. I didn't make a drastic change in anything I was doing. 6 months later, the lesions were bigger, and then there were more cysts. So then I said to the doctor, okay, you said not to worry about it then, to wait and see, and now we've waited and seen, and it's worse. So what do I do now? And he said again, oh, don't worry about it. Just come back in 6 months. And that's when I thought, okay, why? And when I asked around, and I asked another friend who was a doctor, a psychiatrist, but obviously she's done medical school. And she said, oh, they're just waiting until it's something they can do something about. And when I asked the doctor again, I said, okay, look, what's to come then? What happens if 6 months from now it's a lot worse? well, what would we do? What are the steps we would take to sort of rectify this? And he talked about, oh, well, we might have to resection your liver, but it's the bigger lobe. It was the right lobe of my liver. And initially it was just in segment 4 and segment 6 or something like that. But now it was already moving into the other segments of the liver. They number it. And I was just not willing to accept that. I just thought, that sounds like BS, you know? I mean, it's going to mean drastic. And he said that these were his words. He was like, oh, it would definitely have an impact on your quality of life. So when I asked, like, why can't we just do a biopsy? Why can't we stick a needle in there and try to, you know, take some of this fluid out and see what's in there, whether it's cancer or not? And he was, again, like, very, you know, oh, there's so many, they're so small. You know, it would be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's hard to access it. We'd have to access it through the back of your rib cage. And so basically, like, saying, nah, we can't do that. And when I researched it, it was like, well, if it is cancer and they stick a needle in it and it just pops, then it's out there in your liver and it'll spread all over your body. These are the things they don't tell you, you know? Because why? Because there's no point in telling you these things. Like, what's the point? Right. It's there. At that point, they can't do anything about it. So they manage your expectations. They manage your, you know, that's what they manage because they can't give you any medication for it. So that's when I started researching. And then a friend of mine put me on to this Facebook group called Cannabis Oil Success Stories, COSS, I think. At the time, it had like 100,000 people who were members. Wow. It's probably more now. And what I was seeing was a lot of stories of people using cannabis oil to cure cancer. And I thought, okay, well, I haven't got cancer, you know, not just yet. What it could progress to is that. But I was skeptical. So I was like, okay, well, this is illegal. You know, I can't do that. So what can I actually do that would still be legal, that would still cure my liver? And what I came across was the CBD. So I looked into CBD. It wasn't necessarily available here in Hong Kong, but it was available in Holland. But cannabis is also available in Holland, but not cannabis oil, which is what they call Rick Simpson oil. But there's politics behind that too, Rick Simpson versus just full extract cannabis oil. So I went to Holland for 3 months. My husband stayed here, watched the kids. I mean, he had to work, but luckily we have help here. So I went there for 3 months and essentially by myself learned how to make full extract oil. And I was getting access to CBD in paste form, the very strong stuff. And that's what I did for 3 months, is essentially change my diet to a fully vegan diet.
This is while you were in Holland.
Yes, correct.
Produce there.
Yeah, you know, lots of raw, lots of greens, a rainbow of colors. And it was definitely lonely. And there were times that I felt like I was going out of my mind, like literally, because, you know, when you make the full extract oil, you don't really know how much of it will whack you out. You know, you have to start with very, like, literally a rice grain size, and then you go up and up and up. And to cure cancer, I think they say you got to take something like 60 grams over the course of 90 days, which is a lot. I don't think I made it up to that number. I think I made it up to about 35 grams or something over the course of 3 months, because there were times that I would literally feel like I was poisoned, you know. I'd be sitting there just puking away. It was that bad. So people that say, you know, cannabis and recreational use, it's not the same thing at all. You know, when you're using it as medication, it's not fun. I mean, you're using it for a purpose. There's like a means to an end or whatever. When I came back from those 3 months, I didn't know what my insides were like. I didn't know what I felt like. You know, I'd essentially had 3 months of taking care of myself. And I still had 3 more months before I could do the MRI, because it's every 6 months. So I came back. I had CBD capsules and things like that. I took that. And then at the 6 month mark, when we did the MRI, I was, you know, every time I would the anxiety would build up. I would start to cry. I'd be like, oh, what if it's going to be worse? And, you're already planning for a life where you're not there anymore. Like, how are the kids going to fare, And all I hope for is just give me no change. It's fine. I'd accept no change. And what we saw was a drastic reduction in the size of the lesions. So they'd gone from being like, 1.5 or 2.5 centimeters to being like half. And the number of cysts, it's not easy for them to count, right? But, even looking at the scans, I'm like, I can't really tell the difference. But there was no new cysts. So for me, I was like, well, that's already a good thing. So I just continued on the path that I was on, which was staying plant-based. While I was in Holland, I studied for that course, the certificate course, because I was like, well, I can't eat salads. I can't eat salads every day. It's going to drive me nuts, I was never a big fan of juice either, smoothies. It's a texture thing, I can't I watch people eating smoothie bowls and I'm like, ugh. like what? I'll eat the stuff on the top. I'm not going to eat the stuff underneath. That's just baby food. Yeah. I don't see the point in that. There's no joy. I mean, food has to be for me. Like there's an experience of like whole, just joy. It shouldn't be just like, again, a means to an end, right? Like I'm fueling myself. Where was I? Anyway, so I took that course so that I could learn how to have a proper balanced diet, And that's when I realized, well, this whole concept of balanced diet, like, oh, are you getting your protein? It's a myth. And that made me so relieved, because I struggle sometimes with excessive bean consumption. I'm like, just toot, like, I don't really enjoy that bit. Even like excessive fiber consumption before, it would really wreck my gut, But after I realized, oh, okay, it doesn't really matter how we go about this as long as 20% of my diet is protein. And I can get that 20% from broccoli or even brown rice, I mean, everything's got protein in it. So I stopped worrying about that as much. I just ended up making sure that I ate almost like a rainbow worth of veggies. I didn't even sit there twisting myself up about like excessive greens, like gotta be green and leafy and growing above the ground. I didn't care too much about that. But 6 months later, again, with that whole upheaval of like emotional, oh, what if it's worse? What if it's da-da-da-da-da? I went in and we came back and it was just like no sign of disease. That's what it said. And it was Christmas time. It was around that time. It was like November or December. And we just looked at it and we just looked at each other, my husband and myself, and we're like, wow, like no sign of disease. It was like, did they get this right? And when you get that kind of answer, you kind of want to scream it from the rooftops. You want to tell people like, dude, change what you're eating, CBD all the way. You want to save everybody. And then you still see your mates like chowing down on like prime rib and, sopping it up with like several bottles of wine. And then you're just like, it's okay to have the wine from time to time, but just slow down or back away from certain things.
Yeah. That's an incredible story. So what you're telling me is you went to Holland, you changed to a plant-based diet, you worked in a good amount of CBD.
Yep.
And you came home and continued the plant-based diet. And you're telling me that they saw no disease in the liver after this treatment. Were there any other variables that you can think of, like physical activity? I mean, de-stress was probably something that happened, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like I was super stressed before.
Okay.
Excuse me. Mainly because I was kind of a stay-at-home mom. I had a jewelry business, but it wasn't like I was, out there ducking and weaving and selling hard every day. So it wasn't like I was under a whole lot of stress. But going there meant that I really had to do very little. I got a gym membership, and I would literally go to the gym every day. If I wasn't at the gym lifting weights, I was running or whatever, and I was eating super healthy. I wasn't consuming any alcohol. I wasn't consuming sugar and things like that. So to a great extent, that's all I had to do was
Right.
just stay the course.
Yeah, just take care of yourself, right?
Yeah. And, in my spare time, all I did was like go for movies or go for a wander and window shop. I mean, I didn't even shop. So 3 months of doing that, by the end of it, I was really desperate to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was easy. I mean, like over here, I feel like I go through a lot of stress, and stress can be bad for your liver. But I don't struggle with fatigue as I did when I had a liver issue. I mean, I knew that there was something wrong because I was just always tired. Like no amount of sleep was enough. And now I find that I can kind of survive just fine on, 6 to 7 hours of sleep, not because I want to, but because I have to.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, so one thing I want to be clear on, what made you decide to go plant-based? Was it somebody recommended it, or you read something, some sort of light bulb went on somewhere where you found that plant-based might be the answer?
I'd always known that it was the answer.
Okay.
I just didn't want to hear it.
Right.
When I lived in Tokyo for 2 years, I went through this whole thing of, women are always unhappy with the way that they look, right? So I was just like, oh, I want to be more healthy. I want to be skinnier. And so I went through this. I'd watch all these videos on YouTube, and there was this one thing that stood out, and it was essentially she was living a raw vegan diet, juicing and eating fruit, like a ton of fruit. But then also, yeah, and eating all these salads and stuff like that. So, and then I came across Joel Furman's book, Eat to Live, I think it was called.
Yes.
And it made so much sense to me. I'm like, of course, you're eating things that are still alive. I mean, vegetables, fruit, and all of that. I mean, you're not eating it overcooked. You're cutting out white rice and pasta and all the processed food. And I did that, and literally in the course of 2 months, I dropped 10 kilos.
Wow.
And, at the time, I didn't appreciate it fully for what it was because I felt like I ended up looking older. Because, I lost that much weight that my skin kind of, like my cheekbones were sticking out.
Yeah.
And that can look attractive on somebody that's taller and probably better built. But for me, I just ended up looking like, I was like, oh my gosh, I look really, really thin.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I was eating unhealthy either. It's just obviously that's what kind of excess weight and water I was carrying around with me. I had loads of energy. I would literally gorge on fruit. Mm-hmm. And I don't get to do that anymore, mainly because I sit there worrying about the sheer amount of sugar that I'm consuming, but also because I'm not living that life. I'm not doing the raw vegan eating plan,
Right.
So eating excess fruit along with my cooked food and possible some processed goods would be like just a bad idea.
Yeah, it'd be a bomb.
Yeah, it would be a bad idea for me now. But I remember feeling full of energy. I remember like seeing that my eyes were shining. I just don't know whether I'd be able to go back to that kind of way of eating here in Hong Kong because I have so little faith in fruits here.
Oh gosh,
They're so bad.
It's tough. I mean,
They're bad and then they're expensive. So there's
Yes.
like no in between. If you get the expensive stuff and you're like rubbing your hands together and you're like, yep, I just spent $80 on this mango. It's going to be epic. And then it smells ripe. It feels ripe. It looks ripe. You cut it open and it's just rock hard on the inside. And you can't just close it back to like let it sit it out.
yes, I think that's something that I miss from the U.S. is not having, first of all, just a search, like looking for something that's from the U.S. or from the Netherlands or from Australia or New Zealand, because you really don't want to eat the local produce here, unfortunately, with the pollution. And it's a search, first of all, and then it's, you might have found what you think is to be a really nice apple that's from, one of the countries I spoke of, and then it's mealy on the inside or something like that. And it's because from the transportation process, sometimes they're really, really good, but sometimes you end up with something that is pretty disappointing.
Yes.
It's
not even go into avocados. I just gave up on avocados.
I saw a funny, I think it was a meme on avocados. It was like not ready. Up, spoiled. Because
That's been the good thing about owning a restaurant, actually. Now we get access to really epic avocados.
Oh,
but
nice.
then by this point, I'm really not a huge avocado fan anymore. I'm like, yeah, whatever. That's for people to eat.
Yeah.
I don't have to eat it. So
I kind of went, maybe I just went too far on it. I would put them on everything because it was, trying to get healthy fat when I first started plant-based, and found I could get it from a lot of other places too, like olives. But I think I wore myself out on them a little bit, and now it's nice to have a little bit of a slice here and there, but not with every single meal like I was before.
Yeah.
So different people, when they go through their journey moving off of animal products to plant products, have different sort of body reactions. I've mentioned on my show a few times, I think it was the dairy mostly. I'm like you. I want you to tell your story, but we both sort of went cold turkey, if you will. It's a funny term for this. And I had, basically tomorrow, mark it on the calendar, no more animal products. Let's see what happens. And I had really, really bad headaches for like 2 days. And then I started feeling great. And I think it was probably like addiction to dairy because I was having dairy everything.
Yeah.
Milk, cottage cheese, yogurt.
Well, the protein, right?
Yeah. So how about you? Was it difficult for you when you
I would say
switched?
the first time that I did that, when I went, fully raw vegan.
When you were in Japan.
Right? That I do remember. I went through a 2-week period of just having horrendous gas. But it was so bad that like even I couldn't be in the room by myself, I was like, oh my God, this is so bad. It's like peeling the paint off the walls. And I was just fearful. I'm like, how am I going to survive this? Like, how am I going to stick to this diet without just being an embarrassment to myself? But after 2 weeks, it passed. I pardon the pun.
Nice. I like that.
Anyway, after 2 weeks, it passed. And then I was like, oh. And every bit of research I read showed like, okay, all that excess fiber, you get all this bacteria in your gut. It's kind of scraping the insides of your walls of your gut. And then once that is all out, then, you're not going to have the same reaction where it's just creating so much methane that it's just bad, just horrendous. Like now, if I eat like a ton of beans, I'll probably still let a couple go, but they're not going to like kill anybody beside me,
Right.
So for me, I think like beans do it. I think lentils, I don't have the same problem. Chickpeas, possibly, depending on how they are cooked, whether they've been washed properly. Anything using chickpea flour, oh yeah, that's going to happen because that's like raw flour, raw chickpeas that have been ground down to flour. So that stuff can also make you kind of,
Do you find it helps? I found it helps me when I get a dry bean and I soak it overnight and sort of lets the bubbles out. Any different for you at all?
That's supposed to be like part of the process of cooking beans and like what's going to remove a lot of the, anti-nutrients, I guess. But yeah, I guess it's relative, right? I mean,
sure.
Sometimes it's just in your mind. Sometimes you're like, oh, yep, this happened because of the beans.
Yes,
Yeah, just blame it on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has nothing to do with anything else I ate. It's got to be the beans. But I don't find any difference. I mean, I know there's all these things that you can use, like Asafoetida or whatever, like Hing, to cook with it. That'll also decrease the chance of flatulence with it.
What is that? I'm sorry.
It's an Indian herb. I don't know whether it's a herb or a spice. I'm not sure, but it's called Hing. Hing. And Asafoetida, AESOF. Yeah, it's a very odd word. We could Google it.
Yeah, we'll put these in the show notes.
But
for
Indians
everybody.
would put that into it. It's got a certain aroma to it as well, and it does kind of smell like farts. But anyway, you can put it into a dal, or you can put it into a curry that has beans or whatever, and it kind of like decreases the way your gut reacts to it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
that's really cool. So, I want to talk about your home unit.
Yep.
Because getting support through the process of switching your nutrition plan is really helpful. My wife still looks on the menu to make sure there's something for me to eat before she even worries, and the kids before she worries about herself. A lot of women are like that, I guess.
Yeah.
But tremendous support for me. I've been 5+ years now. And so I wouldn't have been able to do it without her help, even though she doesn't eat very much meat and dairy anymore either. But I wasn't pushing that on her or my kids. It was really just about me. It was about performance.
Yeah.
But I know you've said when you transitioned to plant-based,